Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Cover One Roundup here on the Cover One YouTube channel or subsequently wherever you listen to your podcasts. My name is Kyle Silagyi, and I am the co-host of the Cover One Roundup here, joined this and every week by Rob Quinn, features writer. Rob, what's going on?
Not much. Excited to talk about some real football this week.
Right.
The Bills, Lions, got some hot takes for you. Greg Rousseau, Bobby Hart, both ends of the spectrum. So it should be a good show.
I don't know if we can call week one of the preseason real football, but it's more real than like the CFL football I was watching last week. So I'll take the NFL preseason. But yes, we have quote unquote real football to talk about this week, as Rob said. Week one of the preseason. In the books, Buffalo Bills defeat the Detroit Lions. It was a strong game. Few players impressed. Few players didn't impress. We'll get into all that. We'll get into our surprises and disappointments from week one of the preseason. And we'll also do a little preview of week two of the preseason when they travel to Soldier Field, the home of A.J. McCarron's comeback win a few years ago. That was electric. I don't know if we're going to see anything quite as electric as that in week two of the preseason this year, but hey, one can hope, right? But before we get into any of that, this show and Cover One in general are brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Rob, can you tell us a little bit about Underdog?
Yeah, so we've got an awesome partnership with Underdog Fantasy, which I've been really checking out a lot lately. I've did like 10 drafts in the last 2 weeks. But yeah, you could use the code COVER1 and get a free $25 with a deposit of at least $10. You could play best ball drafts, player props, parlays, all different types of things. So it's really a cool app to play around with. So you should definitely download Underdog Fantasy and use the code COVER1.
Sounds good. Do that. Again, thank you, Underdog Fantasy. So, Rob, we're going to get right into it, okay? And we're actually going to go in a non-chronological order. Like, this is like a crazy movie. We're going to pick up with news that occurred after the game. The Bills had their first roster cut-down day, had to trim the roster by 5 players. And, Rob, we were talking a bit off air. We follow this team pretty closely. I would say closer than most, given just what we do, this podcast, we write about the team, etc. 3 out of these 5 players I didn't know were people. Like I didn't know these were people that existed, but they were on the football team that we write about. So the Buffalo Bills cut offensive guard Markel Harrell, offensive guard Caleb Benenoch, yep. Offensive guard Cyrus Tweetele, defensive tackle Eli Onko, and linebacker Mike Bell. I know these are heartbreaking. I mean, these were difficult cuts to make, and not necessarily difficult in that they're going to miss them, but difficult in that their names are hard to pronounce. So, Rob, what are your takeaways from this first roster cutdown?
I mean, every year there's guys that are literally just on the 90-man roster to take reps in camp, and that's really what these guys were. The offensive linemen didn't even play against the Lions. They didn't play any snaps. I think Onko and Mike Bell actually had a sack, but
Mike Bell played decently, yeah.
Yeah, but those guys didn't factor in. So the new cut-down rule to cut down 5 players before everything else kind of lets them latch on somewhere else. But that's about as detailed as my takes will be on these cuts.
Are you surprised that Bobby Hart was not one of the cuts?
I don't think that he played well by any means. I think it was a cuttable performance, but we'll get into that in a little bit. I know that's one of your big takeaways, but it doesn't surprise me, especially with Deion Dawkins being out. You need a guy to kind of soak up those reps in the next couple preseason games and training camp practices. So we'll see what happens there.
This is the second week in a row I forgot to say the segment name off rip. This is the Roundup, okay? It's where we break down the news of the week, and it's a great name. I don't know why I keep forgetting to say that this is the Roundup. But Roundup segment topic number 2. Luke Kuechly is at One Bills Drive today. He was. Rob, why was he there? Did he take a wrong turn? Like, what's going on there?
Yeah, I don't know how Luke Kuechly ended up in Buffalo, but he must be doing something covering training camp. Obviously, one of the best linebackers in modern NFL history. And Star Lotulelei said today that everyone on the defense could learn something from Kuechly, and he's known as one of the smartest players to ever play the game, really, in terms of his film study and his preparation and just the way that he approached the game. So I think it's really cool that he's there. You know, they had Lorenzo Alexander, another guy people really look up to, working with the linebackers, I think last week or the week before. But it's good, you know, another perspective outside of Babich who they see every day. And sometimes just getting a fresh mouthpiece talking to him or giving him some pointers is always beneficial.
He going to be a coach now? You think full time? He's coming on assistant linebackers coach to Bob Babich?
I mean, you never know. When he retired, he wanted to come back as a scout, and I think he did that for a year, and then he quit. It was too much for him. But I don't know. I could see coaching in his future. Has
it been 2 years since he was retired?
It has. It's crazy.
That's crazy. Wow. But yeah, no, I don't think he's going to come coach, especially as an assistant linebackers coach. But it would be cool. Like, I co-sign everything you said. I think it's like a cool experience for the guys, especially Tremaine Edmunds, right? This young not really up and coming anymore, kind of established linebacker. And now to just get an extra pair of eyes on him, those eyes being one of the best middle linebackers in recent history, or just best linebackers in NFL history, recent NFL history, who has done and succeeded and excelled doing exactly what Tremaine Edmunds is asked to do. Well, that's the type of guy you would want to talk to Tremaine Edmunds going into year 4. So,
right. And you know that's the guy Matt Milano looks up to too, another Boston College guy. So I'm sure there's some connection there as well.
Didn't even think about that. See, this is why we got the best Bills coverage here. we got alma maters. Off rip. All right. So that wraps up the roundup again. The cut down to 5 players that it's difficult. I hope they land on other rosters. But this is a deep roster. And then Luke Kuechly is here in in Buffalo right now. Now moving on to the Buffalo Bills versus Detroit Lions preseason games. The Buffalo Bills won. They haven't lost a preseason game since like 2018 at this point. It's an incredible stretch. Probably one of the most formidable and dominant stretches in NFL history is this Bills preseason streak that they're on. I mean, they haven't lost since 2018 in the preseason. It's incredible. Defeating the Detroit Lions in week 1 of the preseason. I think the score was 16-15 because Dan Campbell tapped out at the end. Dan Campbell didn't even want to give it a go. We were banging the table last week for Dan Campbell, saying he was a crazy dude. I wanted like some trick plays at the end, but no, he's like, let's just get out of here. Whatever. I was expecting more from you, Dan. But yes, the Bills, they played, they won, they looked pretty good. I wouldn't have necessarily have been concerned had they lost to the Lions, but I'm glad that's not a conversation we have to have. So like I said off rip, there were a few players. More players looked good than looked bad, I think. There were more players who shined than there were players who fizzled or didn't look great. And what we're going to talk about first is just, I think, 2 players in particular who shined. The players who impressed us individually the most. And then we'll go on to players who didn't really impress us all that much. And I think you probably have a pretty fair – you could make a fair guess as to who those players are going to be, at least who I'm going to talk about. So, Rob, we'll start with you because it's in the headline. Who's the player who impressed you the most?
We have to start with Greg Rousseau, obviously, the first-round draft pick. He really got the party started, 3rd play of the game with that sack. But I thought he played well. And you look at who he went up against was Penei Sewell, a player that really going through the draft was this can't-miss prospect, a future Hall of Famer. Everyone was touting him as. And Rousseau was the developmental guy that was going to need time to grow. And it took 3 plays for Rousseau to really showcase exactly why he was Buffalo's first-round pick, using his length against Sewell. Obviously, he had some help from Harrison Phillips, kind of bull rushing that guard into the backfield and having Goff step up. But you really saw like a preview of what we can expect from Rousseau this year. And even when he doesn't win with explosiveness or really technique or like a really planned out move, it's his length that when the pocket collapses, he could just reach and use those long arms to really end plays in the backfield. And that's what we saw. Against the run, he did get washed a little bit, but that's to be expected with a more raw player. But overall, I thought Rousseau played really well. Not only that sack, but then the other notable play was with 2 minutes left in the first half when the Bills came out with that kind of NASCAR package with Obata and Basham at D tackle and Epinesa and Rousseau at end, and they both won their reps and sandwiched Tim Doyle. But it was an incomplete pass as he got the pass off. But Rousseau had a really encouraging game, and I was excited to see that.
Yes, it's kind of what everyone's been saying after the game is like, look, Rousseau didn't look refined, didn't necessarily look polished. You can see why he's still being dubbed a raw prospect. But we're seeing that just being 6'6" and having an 83-inch wingspan, he doesn't necessarily need to be the most refined player in the world right now, or the most polished, or have the most well thought out and developed pass rush package. All he really needs to do is get a step on the offensive tackle, and they're probably going to have difficulty making up. Again, that Sewell play. I liked Penei Sewell. I thought he was either offensive tackle 1 or offensive tackle, or I just had a brain fart saying that word. Either OT1 or OT2 in this draft. A lot of people were saying he was like this generational talent. I don't think he was a generational talent, really. But then again, who am I to he's a great offensive lineman? But and also this was his first game at right tackle, at least in a while, because they were asked, I don't know if he's played right tackle in the past, but they're switching him to play right tackle at least this year in Detroit. So there's a lot of circumstances around Penei Sewell. But again, that is the 7th overall pick that, like you said, the developmental guy just ran past him, or, just kind of took him to work there on the 3rd play from scrimmage. So again, that was very reassuring to see from Greg Rousseau, which, as we've said on weeks past in this podcast, or on this podcast with Rousseau, it's a case of we didn't know how impactful he was going to be in his rookie year because of how raw he was, or because of how underdeveloped his actual, he was as a technician. But now it's a case of okay, he can develop that along the way, but for now, all he has to do is kind of out-athlete people. And at least in the first week of the preseason and what we've seen from training camp, it looks like he can out-athlete people at the NFL level, at least, for now. So that's reassuring to see. Again, I don't think he's going to be, I don't think he's supplanting Hughes or Addison on the depth chart this year, but he's going to be, he and Epinesa are going to be a fun rotational pair. Taking 30 or 40% of the snaps. So they are going to be very fun to watch.
Definitely. I think that the Sewell play was really encouraging, but one of the knots on Sewell was his length. So I'm interested to see in what Rousseau can do against a guy with those elite measurables that can match up with him and isn't a rookie and kind of has a plan for when he gets beat and needs to counter to fight back against Rousseau's 2nd or even 3rd move. So we'll see that going forward. We probably won't see it against the Bears because they don't really have any quality tackles on the roster. But going forward, it'll be something to keep an eye on, because I think against these inferior players, either talent-wise or physical stature-wise, that Rousseau can win those matchups easily. But I do want to see how he can do against more refined offensive linemen.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, neither of us are crowning Greg Rousseau at this point. He still has work to do. And again, but you expect that out of the 30th or 30. What was he? He was the 30th overall pick, right? You expect that out of the 30th overall pick in the draft. You don't expect him to come in and be a day one world beater. He still has, you still have to see what he can do. But it is reassuring to see what we've seen from him thus far. So very, very pleased with Greg Rousseau. So moving on to my player, also not crowning him, but I was very impressed with what I saw from him. And we saw a lot of him this week. He played the most defensive snaps out of any Bill, and it's Damar Hamlin. Now, he didn't show up on the stat sheet all that much. I think he had 2 tackles, one of which was, I think he had the sack on the final play of the game or something like that. So he didn't really show up on the stat sheet. But every time I saw Damar Hamlin, I was impressed. It was kind of a case of when Damar Hamlin made a play, you knew Damar Hamlin was in on that play. Like, I just liked the feistiness that he played with. I liked the pop in his hits. I just liked the competitive nature. Like, he had what did I write down here? He played on 49 defensive snaps, or 71%. Also played on 56% of the special team snaps, and he had good plays both on defense and on special teams. There was a play with, I wrote it down, 8 minutes, 30 seconds left in the third quarter. He was a high safety back in coverage, and then Geronimo Allison was on a crossing route. And when I initially watched the play, I thought it was a pass breakup from Damar Hamlin. But I was rewatching the game earlier, and he just saw the crossing route, dropped down, and Geronimo Allison realized that Damar Hamlin was coming up. So Geronimo Allison just made a business decision and just didn't catch the ball. But had Geronimo Allison caught the ball, he would have got it. It would have been a pass breakup from Damar Hamlin. Damar Hamlin was flying in, and again, laid a hit on him. And then a couple minutes later, I think it was on a punt, Damar Hamlin was on the coverage team, runs down, kind of got juked out a little bit at first. Then he gets on the ground, doesn't give up, just holds on to the guy's legs, and he doesn't go anywhere. He gets stopped, then he gets taken down. So again, and each time he got up, he was clapping, he was hyped. I just liked what I saw out of Damar Hamlin, the feistiness, the passion, just an overall good game. He again, not a stat sheet guy, but I feel like he was impactful just in terms of his feistiness, in terms of what he brought, in terms of his passion. So did you see the same thing as I saw out of Damar Hamlin? Or am I just crazy here? Am I reading between the lines?
No, I really like the energy that he played with, and I think in coverage he played well. He did have a really bad missed tackle. I wouldn't say really bad. It was at the second level on one of the on a big run. But yeah, I really like the energy that he played with, and he always seemed to be around the ball, which I did like. But for a 6th-round rookie, I was pretty impressed with how he played in his first game.
Oh yeah, for sure. And again, he wasn't perfect. Certainly wasn't perfect, right. As Ron Beck writes in chat. Hamlin had a bad miss on a tackle too. He did. But again, he's a 6th-round rookie. Like, I wasn't expecting to see anything out of Damar Hamlin in this game. Like, I'm doing my own, like, just keeping along on my own 53-man roster projection just in Google Drive. And I didn't have Damar Hamlin on the roster before this game. Or if I did, he was like on the bubble. I didn't see him as a roster lock. But he was just a guy who every time he was in on a play, you knew he was in on a play, as I said earlier. Again, not perfect, but I think he showed this game that he has tools. He can be developed along. He can be a teamer this year, probably, and then you can develop along behind Micah Hyde and behind Jordan Poyer. I don't know if he's ultimately going to become a starting safety, but we'll see. I liked what I liked what I saw from Damar Hamlin. Maybe he's my new guy, because I don't think Daryl Johnson's. Maybe we'll see. Ooh. I know that's your hot take later. We'll get into it then about Daryl Johnson, but I might need a new guy. Damar Hamlin might be that guy. So there was more that impressed us in this game, certainly, which we'll get into. But now we have to be a bit somber. It's going to get a bit disappointing. Rob, who didn't impress you in this game?
Well, you got the top act here, but Siran Neal kind of disappointed me, especially with the hype that he's gotten this offseason from Leslie Frazier saying they wanted to carve out a bigger role for him on defense. Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer saying he was the most athletic player they've ever played with, and reports out of camp talking about how he was playing really well. And then in the first quarter, they lined him up in the slot against rookie receiver Amon-Ra St. Brown, and he was cooked 2 or 3 times when he was playing man coverage. And now Neal isn't going to be asked to play against shifty slot receivers. He's more defending tight ends and stuff from that position, but it still was discouraging to see after the high praise that he's gotten throughout this summer. I wanted to see more from him, and he really didn't deliver.
Right. Like any guy who gets the offseason rub, you're kind of or at least hoping he comes into week 1 of the preseason and plays well. Whereas with Siran Neal, that's not what happened. Amon-Ra St. Brown kind of cooked him a few times, just beat him off the line of scrimmage consistently. Had 3 receptions on him. I think 1 was called back. I think St. Brown technically only had 2. The longest reception was called back, I think on a holding call. But again, it wasn't a great performance from Siran Neal. The saving grace, though, as you said, is that that's not the role that Siran Neal is going to have. He's not going to be asked to cover those shifty guys in the slot, as you said. He's going to be asked to cover tight ends if he does have a defensive role. So that's why I'm not overly concerned with what we saw out of Siran Neal, but I do agree that it was a bit disappointing. After all the hype, that's what he comes out with. But again, there's still time to recover.
Right.
Okay. This is what everyone tuned in for. My biggest non-impressor, if that makes sense, the guy who impressed me the least, one could even say disappointed me, was Bobby Hart. I think Greg Thompson, Cover One's Own, said it best when he was on the post-game show with Anthony, and he said something, I don't remember it verbatim, but he said, anything neutral I've ever said about Bobby Hart, I take it back, or something like that. Like, even giving him the benefit of the doubt is too much. Bobby Hart was very, very not good, and you knew what you were getting into on the first play from scrimmage. Devin Singletary breaks off a nice 15-yard run, which we might get into Devin Singletary later. He had a real good game. Bobby Hart had a holding call, which so the 15-yard run got called back, and we were like, oh, okay, this is going to be Bobby good.
Hart.
Yes. Played on 42 snaps, 23 at right tackle, 18 at left tackle. Didn't look good at either position. I don't know which one he looked worse at. Do you have an opinion on which one he looked worse at?
I think he gave up a sack from each.
Yep. PFF says that he allowed 2 sacks in 42 snaps, allowed 2 sacks. Again, held on the first play, consistently just got backed up, just all the time. Julian Okwara, I think it was in the fourth quarter, just made him look like a fool on one play and probably on numerous plays. He didn't look like a fool on just one play. And like, my biggest takeaway from it, the thing that irks me the most is, like, yes, he's bad, but also I don't think he's making the roster. So like, I can't be mad that there's a bad offensive lineman in a preseason game, because there's bad offensive linemen in every preseason game, numerous bad offensive linemen in every preseason game. My biggest thing that like irked me about it is that we really couldn't get a great analysis on Jake Fromm, because he never really had time to throw, because Bobby Hart was always getting beat. Like, within seconds, there was always someone there in or near the pocket disrupting him. Now, Jake Fromm made a few bad throws, made a few good throws. If he had solid protection, maybe we would have a better analysis on the type of player that he is. But right now, we don't know. It's a mixed bag, and it's like, well, you know, how much of that is Jake Fromm and how much of that is his offensive line sucked, which you can say for every fourth string quarterback at the end of a preseason game, because as we said, those offensive linemen aren't good. But Bobby Hart, very not good. And again, I can see why he made it past this first round of roster cuts, because you do want experience. And I think you sent a tweet about this yesterday where it's like, backup offensive linemen are bad, so just go with the guy with experience. If he's going to be bad anyway, go with the guy with experience. And it's like, yes, but it's Bobby Hart. He's just like, what? He's that bad. Why is he on the team?
Right. And it's crazy. This guy has started over 60 games, I believe, in his career, and he's gotten multi-year contracts. I think he got like $16 million from the Bengals before he got cut, and he latches on with Buffalo, and it's just very strange, and it worries me. Just to play devil's advocate, I am on the Bobby Hart is terrible train, but with Spencer Brown as the only tackle behind Deion Dawkins, who's out, and we don't know what's going on with him, Darrell Williams, and then Tommy Doyle. If the Bills are keeping 4 tackles, are you keeping Tommy Doyle? Or if you're the coaching staff looking at a guy you just signed in free agency who started over 60 games in the NFL, regardless of being terrible, or this rookie day 3 draft pick in Tommy Doyle, it's troublesome. And obviously, even if he made the roster, you're not thinking that he's going to play. But if it comes down to it, and Dawkins isn't ready by the start of the season, I know McDermott was pretty grim in his outlook, saying he's nowhere near ready to play. Now we're going into week 1 against the Steelers, who have TJ Watt, Melvin Ingram, with Spencer Brown, Darrell Williams and either Tommy Doyle or Bobby Hart, which is not a good look.
Right. It's not like you tried to go to bat a little bit for Bobby Hart there, but it's just like you ended up, I think, dunking on him even more. It's just like, right. It's like a numbers thing, but also it's like the same thing can be said with like continuity. Like people are like, oh, you need continuity in coaching staffs. And it's like, well, if they're bad, why do you want continuity? It's like, oh, you need 4 offensive tackles. Well, if the fourth one's Bobby Hart, do you need 4? It's just like
hey, I will say this. Bobby Hart did say that TJ Watt is overrated.
Did he?
Said that he is the best right tackle in the NFL. He said that when he was in Cincinnati. So week 1 might be something. Might be saving it for week 1.
Rob, I might be turning around on Bobby Hart here. Well, that's just something I love. I love when players are kind of confident for no reason. Like coming out of Wyoming, I wasn't big on Josh Allen. I know, crazy, right? Don't come at me, Bill's Twitter. I wasn't crazy on Josh Allen coming out of Wyoming. And then when he came out and just verbatim said what Mel Kiper said, when he was like, yeah, stats are for losers. I won at Wyoming. I was like, I love this guy. This guy is great. All right, yes, and then I was going to bring this up too. Jonathan writes, any report on Deion Dawkins' conditioning from a concerned fan about Allen's blindside? Good question. Now, the thing with Deion Dawkins, I had a busy weekend, so I didn't really get a chance to look into this. Is it like he's not physically fit or he's still dealing with like side effects from COVID? Do we know which it is?
McDermott didn't specify, but it does sound like it's a little bit of both. It sounds like he's just getting over the symptoms of dealing with COVID, and that caused him to lose a lot of weight, and he's out of shape. So
so it's like out of shape, but not because of anything he could have done. Well,
yeah,
he could have. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, he's got time. Let's hope he gets over it, but he's got some time to build back up here. But I mean, look, even if Dawkins were healthy, I wouldn't necessarily be a person sitting here saying Allen needs to play in the preseason.
Right.
But now with Dawkins out, keep him off the field. I don't want Allen with Spencer Brown or Bobby Hart. Like, if we're in a game and Deion Dawkins has to come out for a snap or two and Spencer Brown walks in, I say put Mitch Trubisky in.
I agree. I don't know.
I mean, Allen rolls to the right, maybe just like immediate.
Yeah. Or it's not good. I mean, with Dawkins, because this is something, it's not an injury with a set timetable. You know, he's just getting over COVID. Obviously, it affected him significantly to the point where he's missed about the entire first month of training camp. And we're 3 weeks away from the regular season. And the coach, he was pretty serious and seemed pretty pissed off when he said he's nowhere near ready to play or be a factor for us. So hopefully that Deion can get his legs under him quick enough. But it's definitely something that I'm concerned about, especially after watching Bobby Hart.
Right, watching the alternatives.
Yeah.
Oof. That puts a damper.
Yeah, that took a deep turn.
So we'll try to pick up the mood a little bit here. We will now move on. I believe, yes, we covered who impressed and who did not impress us. So we are now moving on to our biggest surprises and disappointments from the preseason game. Again, I think we each have a player here to talk about, and then we each have just kind of a position group or an area of the game in which we were surprised with the performance. So I will kick off here. I was pleasantly surprised with the pass rush and the defensive line as a whole. Because the defensive line, we were told all offseason. I mean, they've said, or Bean has said this on numerous occasions. McDermott has said this on numerous occasions. That's kind of the area in which they focused, the area in which they looked at and said, if we are going to beat the Chiefs, if we are going to take the next step, it's going to be with a better defensive line. That's what we need to improve this offseason. And they invest a lot in it, specifically their first 2 draft picks and then F.A. Obata, and they're getting Harrison Phillips back. So I wasn't sold on the moves, right? Because the defensive line has consistently been kind of the trouble spot of this regime. Like, they've never really gotten great pass rushing production. That's kind of been the one spot where they've failed to be formidable consistently. And they just kind of doubled down on that roster building philosophy with bringing in the same type of defensive end that they've brought in their entire time. So I was like, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. And again, it's been one preseason game and just a few weeks of training camp. But again, looks like I was wrong, which happens all the time. But the pass rush was great for me. The defensive line combined for 4 quarterback hits and 2 sacks. The team as a whole had 4 sacks, but defensive linemen had 2. Rousseau looked great, which we talked about. Epenesa's transformation is crazy, and I just hope he is productive because I want to hear some of the stories that are going to be told about AJ Epinesa. Just how he transformed his game from being like the power guy who can kick inside. Now he's a speed rusher. Now he wins with speed and explosiveness and burst and hand technique. It is crazy the transformation that AJ Epinesa has made, and I hope that he can, I hope that results in production from him. But again, Bookie Basham wasn't crazy about him, but we'll talk about him later. But Harrison Phillips looked great on Friday, just opening up lanes for the linebackers to get in there, specifically on like running downs. Tyrell Dodson really looked good because of Harrison Phillips. He shot a couple gaps that Harrison created. Harrison Phillips also got some pass rush in there on the Rousseau sack. Phillips played a big role in that. I don't know if any of you watched the film room yesterday that was on the Cover One YouTube channel, but great look into that play and just the defensive line as a whole. Harrison Phillips looked great. Just the defensive line as a whole. And again, it was interesting to see how guys were used because I think I said last week you weren't going to see any like exotic pass rushing packages. Like we've said, F.A. Obata and all these guys can play inside, but I don't know if you're going to see them play inside. Obata played inside a lot. Looked better on some snaps than others, but he played inside a lot. Basham played inside. It was just, it's good. And it's fun to see that, again, with this regime, it looks like everything's going to play out as planned. Again, it could change. We could get to week 1 and there's no pass rushing production, but it just looks like it's going to work out because Rousseau is winning with his length. Epinesa is winning with his speed. And just, I'm happy that they got pass rushing production consistently, always, within seconds, just getting to the quarterback, making the quarterback, if he wasn't going down, if he, or just throwing it away or making a quick decision or just having to make a check down, not really being able to progress through his reads because of how fastly the defensive line was getting to him, whether that be, again, Harrison Phillips pushing a guard into his face or guys getting around tackles on the outside and actually being there to make some contact. So, yeah, I think that's just it was a good performance from the defensive line, and thus I was impressed.
Yeah, from start to finish, they were really fun to watch. And like you said, we didn't think that we were going to really see the exotic packages or anything, but we did. And after the game, Sean McDermott said that he wanted to see, or not after the game yesterday, he said that he wants to see more of that throughout the preseason, seeing where guys can play, where they can't, who can really win inside and who can't. In the film room, we saw Obata get washed in the run from inside, but we know that he's not going to be playing on early downs.
He's not playing there.
Right. So I think we're going to see more of that throughout the preseason, and it should be fun to see. Basham, I want to see more of. I know you're going to talk about him a little bit. But as far as Rousseau and Epinesa, and then they're getting Hughes back, it seems like probably this week or next week. From top to bottom, this is a talented defensive line group. And the future is bright. Obviously, things could go south. Like you said, it is just one game. But what we saw on Friday night was very, very encouraging.
Agreed. So, what was your biggest surprise from week 1 of the preseason?
So, I'm going to eat crow and talk about Cody Ford. In the first episode of the Cover One Roundup podcast, I was a little harsh on our friend Cody, but on Friday night, he played excellent, both run and pass. He was fantastic. He looked like a different player. Pulling, he was meeting defenders in space, locking onto them. He was getting pushed in zone runs. He was just very overall looked like a different player. And then today he said that it felt like him again, like the player that he was at Oklahoma. And you could just tell how happy he is. And like when you see him talk, it's funny to see just somebody that's that like charismatic and excited about playing. PFF graded him in the 50s, both in run blocking and pass blocking.
Oh, wow, accurate.
Which was odd to me because every snap that I watched on offense, he was winning his reps. He was the sole blocker on a couple big runs. Matt Breida was one of them that set up the Devin Singletary touchdown. But I was really excited to see Ford play because he was a player that I was very concerned about. His first 2 years in the league, he was rough to say the least. And like, it's just the preseason. Obviously, you have to take everything with a grain of salt. You can't get too high, can't get too low. But what we saw from Cody Ford was a player that was confident, powerful, and he was more agile than I've seen him probably since he joined the team. Like he was getting out in space and winning his reps and driving through defenders at the point of contact. So it was fun to watch. And I think going forward, it'll be very exciting to see.
Do you attribute his success to the number change?
You never know.
It might be. We might have like a Kobe situation, like 8 Kobe and 24 Kobe. We have 70 Cody Ford, who wasn't good. Now we have 74 Cody Ford, who is the best guard in the league. Ryan Teller, one could say. He
said that he had to go back to where he was to get to where he's going. So his college number went back to Oklahoma during the off season. So it looks like we're seeing a new Cody Ford this year, and I'm excited about it because that run game definitely needs a guard inside like Cody Ford to help spring some holes.
Yeah, he looked great. I mean, I liked Cody Ford coming out of Oklahoma. Or actually, my friend liked Cody Ford, he's a huge Oklahoma fan. He was high on Cody Ford. He was texting me while I was in the Bills media room while they picked Cody Ford. I was trying to record the Cody Ford press conference from, just the conference call. And he was just texting me and my phone was going off. It wasn't great. But, yes, I like Cody Ford. I thought he looked good. Again, pull blocking, had to open up a few good holes on specifically for Devin Singletary. He opened up a few holes for Matt Breida. Whether or not Matt Breida saw him or took them, we'll get into. But yes, Cody Ford, very, very nice to see that. Again, he's proving you wrong. Yes, everyone who watches this show know that I was always a Cody Ford guy. I did not say that he was just going to be a backup vet or a backup versatile guy. I didn't say that at all. I always said that he was going to be really good this year. And we saw that this week.
Yeah, you thought he was the Ryan Bates replacement playing all 5 spots.
Nope. That's deleted from the archives. All right. So we'll just go off that point. I brought up Matt Breida there. Matt Breida is my disappointment, and not necessarily because he was bad. Now you might say, Kyle, he had 27 yards on 10 carries for a 2.7 average. That is bad. Maybe. But I didn't think it might just be like he was comparatively bad because Devin Singletary looked so good. Mm-hmm. Like Devin Singletary had this new burst. He showed that vision. Devin Singletary looked great. Again, as I said earlier, had a 15-yard run to start the game. It got called back. Then he got another 15 yards on the next play. It's just like, oh, okay, Devin, I see what you're doing. You look pretty good. And I think you said last week, can Devin Singletary prove that he is not, or he is the 1B and not the 2? Mm-hmm. Yes, he showed that in this week or in week 1 of the preseason. Whereas Matt Breida, I wanted to see speed from him this week, and I wanted to see some pass catching ability, and we really didn't see either. And again, maybe he just didn't have the opportunity to show off that speed, never really got into open space. But there were, what did I write down here? I mean, sometimes it was a case-by-case basis. Like sometimes the holes weren't there, and that's why he struggled. Sometimes the holes were there, and he just didn't find them. And again, he had one big run, which he said, which ultimately set up the Devin Singletary receiving touchdown. But I just wasn't over the moon with Matt Breida's performance, and I wanted to be because I like Matt Breida. I've said that numerous times on this podcast. I think Matt Breida can have a role in this offense. I think he can be a very fun third running back. Use him in a variety of ways. But I just didn't see it this week. Do I still think he'll make the roster? Probably. And again, it was kind of a vanilla game plan offensively because with Trubisky and it was just handoffs. That's all it was. He threw 2 passes, and Breida got his fair share of touches as well, fair share of carries. But I just wasn't, as I said, I wasn't over the moon. I wanted to see a bit more. Wasn't bad, but when you compare it to the game that Devin Singletary had, it was a bit lackluster. So how do you feel about Matt Breida's performance?
Yeah, it was hit or miss for me. Like he had that one run, but it was sprung by Cody Ford. And then there was one play specifically I remember when he had the opportunity to get the edge on an outside run, and he just didn't get there in time. And he was stopped, I think, for like a yard. So that was kind of disappointing. But like you said, comparatively to Devin Singletary, his performance looked a lot worse. But then again, when you look at the amount of carries that he had 10 carries. And so he had the opportunities. The game plan was a bit vanilla, but he just didn't make the most of those opportunities. And then you saw Antonio Williams come in and how hard he was running. And he didn't really have the stats to back it up either. But I just thought that Antonio Williams ran harder and just looked better than Breida. So
I don't know if I'll co-sign that, but like I like Antonio Williams. We'll see. Yeah. We'll see. Matt Breida, you're not my player to watch for next week, but I'm going to be watching you, if that makes sense. So, Rob, what is your biggest disappointment from week 1 of the preseason?
The depth at cornerback. Levi Wallace made one of the defensive plays of the game, breaking up the pass in the end zone. And I thought Dane Jackson played well, too. A lot of people said that he got burnt on that reception with Tyrell Williams. I don't think so. I think it was just a cover 2 look, and the safety didn't get there in time. So Dane Jackson, he didn't really play great, but I don't think he played bad at all. But it was more the rookies, Rashad Wildgoose and Elijah Griffin. Both got cooked individually. Wildgoose got beat for a 35-yard play by Javon McKinley, and then Griffin got beat, I think, for a 30-yarder as well. So behind Tre'Davious White and Levi Wallace, there's Dane Jackson, who we're all excited about. But behind those guys, is there a reason to be concerned? I mean, we saw Saran Neal in man coverage, was not impressed. And then you go down the depth chart with Wild Goose and Griffin, and that was definitely rough. I mean, it's their first NFL action. They're late round picks. They're not expecting an undrafted guy. So you're not expecting them to make a real impact. But if they do make this team, and God forbid something does happen to Tre'Davious White or Levi Wallace, and these guys have to play meaningful snaps, then you get into that area where you're not as excited about the secondary as you once were. Granted, it was the first preseason game, but the depth at cornerback really left a lot to be desired. Cam Lewis, I didn't really focus on him that much. I remember that he had one good play in coverage. I forget against who, but yeah, overall the depth at corner really, really concerned me.
I agree. It was, I don't want to say very concerning, but it was very concerning. Like, I don't know how many teams do have a 4th NFL caliber boundary corner, but if the Bills certainly aren't one of them, regardless of how many there are that have that, the Bills aren't one of them. Because after Levi Wallace, there's a bit of a drop off from Levi to Dane Jackson. And then there's a significant drop off from Dane Jackson to whoever you want to say is the 4th boundary guy. Because like Rashad Wildgoose was not great. He got burnt a couple times. Elijah Griffin wasn't great. I'm going to go to the chat for a question here. Rob and I discussed this before we went on there. Did McLeod have a pick 6 that was called back? And if not, why do I vividly remember that happening? I think I'm losing my mind. But again, regardless, McLeod, if that did happen, it was good. But if it didn't, then I don't know if he played. Like, I think I'm losing my mind, genuinely. We have a question. Saran Neal, an option at cornerback. He's done a little bit of boundary corner, I do believe. I don't know if it's like, if he's, spent a lot of time there. But, like, maybe if that's what it's going to come to, it did. It got called back. Rob, it did happen.
Yep. There you go.
I'm not going. Thank you.
Now, I do not think Noah Fant recovered the fumble in that
Noah
game.
Fant did not recover the fumble.
You're 1 for 2 on that.
There was a Steve Tasker background there. There was a Steve Tasker call where I swore he said Noah Fant recovered that fumble, and I was like, no, he didn't. Okay, there we go. That's what it was. It wasn't even close to an interception. There we go. Thank you. It happened. It wasn't even close. And I remember that it just hit the ground and he picked it up and ran, just thinking it was gonna. Okay, so he's not making the roster because of that. But yes, they don't have this one off the rails here. They do not have a fourth boundary corner who is NFL caliber because they just don't. And obviously you hope that both of your starting corners aren't going to be injured at the same time, but it can happen. Even if it's just say Levi's hurt for a game or two and Dane has to come in, Dane Jackson has to come in and start, and then Trey White gets hurt for a play or two. On that one or two plays where you have Rashad Wildgoose in, what number did he wear? I don't remember. But, if a corner comes in wearing a 30s or a 40s number, the quarterback is targeting that corner. That's just going to happen. So it's dangerous. It's a dangerous, predicament to be in. And again,
right. And it wasn't like they're playing Pro Bowl receivers either. We're talking about the Detroit Lions receiving core that they each got cooked by. So it's rough.
It's not great. And again, I don't know if this is a position they address. If you ask me what is the one position that they're going to be watching the waiver wire at, I would probably say cornerback, just to see if they can pick up, a solid third, or it would be fourth guy, but a fourth option at corner. But again, then you carry four corners and then Neal and Johnson. Are you carrying six corners?
Probably not.
So again, you don't even need it. So this conversation was for nothing. Why didn't you stop me earlier, Rob? I just went on a rant about something that was useless. Okay. What's next? Are we yes, we talked about Matt Breida, and he was disappointing. So anything else just about this game before we go into a short preview of next week against the Bears, or technically this week, I don't know. But just anything else before we get into hot takes ultimately, anything that we're not going to touch on in hot takes about this game that you want to talk about?
Nah, we covered it all.
Ooh, well, that's why you go to Cover One. We have the best in-depth coverage of those Bills preseason extravaganzas with the Detroit Lions. All right, so the Bills stay in NFC North cities next week. They go to probably the second best city located on a Great Lake. If we were to power rank them, it would go Cleveland. Cleveland, Detroit, Chicago, Buffalo. Okay, so no, it's actually three. But yes, they're playing in Chicago. NFC North, again, an NFC North opponent. Justin Fields is going to play. We're going to see Justin Fields this week, which should be fun. Maybe the best rookie quarterback. Hot take. No, he's not. But so it's going to be interesting to see how these players who we talked about, those who impressed us, how they, now that they got a little swag, are they going to be able to carry that? The players that disappointed us, are they going to be able to bounce back? So, Rob, who is the player you are going to be focusing on most against the Bears this week?
I want to see Dane Jackson step up and get an opportunity to make some plays. Also, we know that he's a lock for the roster. So it remains to be seen just how much playing time he'll get, but I will really want to see him push Levi Wallace for that, to see if all the clamoring from fans about him possibly competing for a starting job was warranted or not. I liked what I saw from him last year. I thought he played decently against the Lions, like we talked about. But I'd like to see a little bit more out of him. And this week, Matt Nagy said that he wants to see Justin Fields playing more with Allen Robinson, and Fields killed it last week. I don't think another player had a better game than Fields did in the first week of the preseason. So now with Allen Robinson getting some time with Fields, I want to see possibly if that's a matchup that we're going to see. But overall, I just want to see Dane Jackson kind of put together a string of plays in however many chances that he gets to show that he's worthy of starting. Even if he doesn't win the starting job, just show that this competition is actually a competition and not just a media-created storyline.
That was very bold after I went on a 5-minute tangent about cornerbacks to go right back to quarterbacks. So I'm not – you guys know my opinion on the cornerback position by now. But, yes, I would like to see Dane Jackson, as you said, remake it a competition, because that was highly anticipated coming into training camp, and Levi Wallace just kind of took it and ran with it. So I would like to see Dane Jackson again. I don't think he's winning the starting job at this point, but I would like it to be closer than it is. The player that I am going to focus on most this week is Boogie Basham. Again, I praised the pass rush earlier. I praised the defensive line, and like all of that sans Boogie Basham. Like Carlos Basham did not look particularly well, was just underwhelming, especially compared to Greg Rousseau, the other rookie defensive end. He was just like, he didn't have the get off. Like, I don't know if lethargic would be the word, or like he just didn't look energetic. And like he kept trying to do the spin move, but it wasn't going anywhere. He just kind of was spinning in place. Yeah. It wasn't a great first impression. And it was just interesting because like Greg Rousseau was supposed to be the raw guy who really couldn't contribute in year one. The measurables guy who couldn't contribute in year one. And then Basham was the more refined guy who could contribute in year one. Whereas now it's like, no, Rousseau is just going to out-athlete people, and Basham's going to struggle because he doesn't have those traits. But again, there's still time. It's only been one preseason game. Of course, there's time for Boogie Basham to bounce back. It just wasn't a great first impression. So I do hope. I don't know if we're going to see him used, creatively again. Maybe a few snaps from inside, probably majority from outside or defensive end. But just like I was underwhelmed. Not great as a pass rusher. Didn't look great in run defense. I hope we see more from him this week. I don't even need a sack. I just need like a flash. It's just like a play where he gets past an offensive lineman. He had one. He had like a phantom roughing the passer call that wasn't great, and I'm not holding that against him. But like it just wasn't a great performance from Boogie. Kind of underwhelming. So I'd like to see him play well this week. You looked at the Bears depth chart. Are they scary?
Not really. I mean, defensively, everyone knows about Khalil Mack, Akeem Hicks, Roquan Smith, those guys, but I don't think we're going to see many of them. As far as the offensive line, they're probably one of the worst in the NFL, if not the worst. I mean, this is a team that just went out and signed Jason Peters, who's like 40, to play left tackle for him. But if there's any silver lining in Basham's performance last week, it's definitely that he's going to be able to go against a pretty rough offensive line this week. So he'll have his opportunities there.
Yes, I agree. I think that anything else to preview for the Bears matchup, or I mean, the Bears. It's the Bears in week 2 of the preseason. There's your preview.
Yeah, I think that's it.
We are now moving on to the hot take segment. The take. It's the show with hot questions and even hotter wings. That's a Hot Ones reference. So, hot takes. Rob, I won't say you stole my hot take, but you stole my player crush. So, because you did that, I'm going to cut you in line and do my hot take first. My hot take, had I said it last week, the comments would have been going crazy. They would have said, Kyle, you're insane. And not just because of your hot take, just because of other reasons. But this week, people are going to say, that's not even a hot take. That's probably one of the easier takes you could have this week. But my hot take is that Andre Smith makes the 53-man roster. We had a conversation, it wasn't even a conversation, but we had a segment on this show a couple weeks ago when you told me that Tyler Matakevich and Andre Smith were getting reps with the ones or with the twos. And I was like, why? Why is this happening? And we saw why, specifically why Andre Smith is getting reps with the two. He looked great against the Lions. Again, played for a large portion of the game. He had 39 snaps versus Detroit. That was 57% of the snaps. Was rangy, a sideline to sideline linebacker. Played decently in coverage. If he did allow a reception, he was always there to make a tackle. And again, he had a great heads up play. Ultimately got called back on an interception, but again, Eric did a good film breakdown of this. I don't know if it was just in the Slack or if it was on Twitter, but go in the Cover One Premium Slack if you want to watch this the breakdown. But again, it was just Andre Smith reading a crossing route, dropping or getting into it, and just jumping to make a beautiful interception. And it got called back because F.A. Obata nearly broke the quarterback's leg. But again, that doesn't affect how Andre Smith played, how he looked on that rep. Again, good. He fits the mold that the Bills want in their linebackers. The athletic sideline to sideline guy. And again, he's a teamer as well. He played on a fair number of special team snaps last year, I believe. So his special teams ability put him in that roster. He was always, a long shot, kind of an under the radar candidate to make the roster, kind of the niche pick. But after this game, it looks like if they need him to, he can actually play some linebacker. Maybe not, elite, but he could be a serviceable fill-in guy if they need him to be. Plus, with his special teams ability, I think it's a pretty safe bet he makes the 53.
Yeah, for sure. I thought all the linebackers played well, but he really stepped up and really stole the show on defense. Because like you said, he played almost a little bit over half the snaps and just big play after big play. And he was flying around out there. Not only that interception, but against the run too. I think he had like 4 or 5 plays where they were stuffed at or just past the line of scrimmage. So I think I don't even think that's that hot of a take. Leslie Frazier today said that he was one of the core special teamers, and he did that last year for them too. And now I think his second year with the team. So yeah, I think that he's probably a lock to make the 53.
I agree. Yeah, all the linebackers looked good. I like Tyrell Dodson. Again, Harrison Phillips was kind of opening up the lanes, but Tyrell was getting in there. Yeah. Joe Giles Harris looked pretty good. I would have said Mike Bell played well, but he's cut now, so it doesn't matter how he played. But yes, they have some intriguing depth linebackers, so it's going to be interesting how they get this down. How many linebackers do you think they're keeping?
I don't know, because you have Edmonds, you have Milano, you have Klein, Matakevich. I don't know. Do they keep assuming
they keep
probably
6?
It's going to be tough because at every position now they're like, do they keep 9 or 10 D linemen, 9 or 10 O linemen, 5 or 6 linebackers? I don't know. Someone's going to have to really play themselves onto the team, but I think Davis is that guy right now.
Do you mean Smith?
Yeah, Smith. I've been calling him Andre Davis all day.
Hey, maybe he's an under the radar guy. Andre Davis is a real under the radar guy to make the 53 at this point. Last year's linebacker, this is from Jason. Last year's linebacker darling was Dodson. Who is it this year? Might be Dodson again. Right now it's Smith, but again, Tyrell, they all looked good. So they have, again, as you said, these depth guys have 2 more preseason games to play themselves onto this roster. So I know what your hot take is. I like your hot take. So tell the people what your hot take is.
Yeah, at this point, I don't know how hot of a take it is. I know a lot of people on Twitter are arguing, saying that it's not even close, that he's making the team. But I think Darryl Johnson is a lock for the roster. And I think that the last few days have only cemented that. Leslie Frazier today called him a core special teamer, saying that what he does is extremely important for the team. Sean McDermott had a lot of praise for him. And I just don't see how he doesn't make the team. He's able to step in on defense. We saw him have a sack against the Lions. But it's not only his preseason performance that we're calling him a lock for the roster, right? It's everything that he's done previously on special teams. His growth on defense. But I don't even think defense is where he's making his money like that. It's special teams. And a lot of people really underrate just how valuable a player that only plays special teams can be. But like Heath Farwell said, when he talks to people from other teams, the first person they ask about is Darryl Johnson, because he's a freak. He's 6'6", like 265, and he's a beast on special teams. He's a crazy athlete, and teams need that. They usually have like 5 to 6 guys that are their core 4 units, special teamers, and Johnson is one of them. And then I think that the icing on the cake for him was getting that sack and showing that he can provide some production on defense. So I think that Darryl Johnson makes the team. I don't know who is at risk of losing their job because of it, which is a totally another conversation. It's probably going to be Vernon Butler, but I think that Johnson is a lock to make the roster.
Like, how much I want Darryl Johnson to make this roster. Like, if I were making the 53-man roster, he'd be the first guy on it for me. It'd be him and then Josh Allen. But Daryl Johnson is number one. I'm a huge Daryl Johnson guy. Have been for quite some time. I was conducting the train before people knew who Daryl Johnson was. But he will be on a 53-man roster this year. I'm just still not sold that it's Buffalo's just because of the numbers game. Like, how many a question here from Jason again. If DJ makes the team, how many defensive ends will be on the 53? I don't know, because you'd have, all right, so let's count how many. Hughes, Addison,
Rousseau, Basham, Obata, Johnson. It'd be 6.
Okay, that'd be 6. And then how many defensive tackles?
Probably 4.
Okay, so Latulele, Phillips, Zimmer,
and Oliver. That's what I'm saying. It's probably Vernon Butler losing his job. I don't know.
He restructured his deal.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that Johnson makes the team, and I think that it's going to be very tough to get rid of him if they do. I just don't think the other guys on the D line play special teams like Johnson does, and that's so valuable. So you're looking at either keeping an extra linebacker or Daryl Johnson.
You know who I would pick. Yes, I want Daryl Johnson to make this roster. I hope your hot take comes true, and he has a path. I will say, you laid out his path pretty clearly right there. He obviously has a path to this 53-man roster because, again, he's shown he's a core special teamer and he can play defensively. Maybe not well, but he can play defensively. He can play defensive end. So I hope he makes the roster. I'm just not ready to go to lock territory. And also, I want to read a tweet that I got before the show. We'll have a discussion about it. This is from Victoria, the host of The Tuck Rule, new podcast. Go listen to it. It's a good show. She writes, Kyle, please convince people that Davis Webb isn't good. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Rob, we talked about this off camera. Is this a narrative right now? Is Davis Webb good? Is that a narrative?
I haven't seen anything about that.
I would hope
good.
Not.
It's all relative. Are we talking preseason against the Detroit Lions good? Or are we talking Josh Allen's contract is now an albatross good?
Right. Davis Webb could be ironically good. But like Jake Fromm might have been ironically better than Davis Webb was. Like I might like to, talk about how good Jake Fromm was more than I like to talk about how good Davis Webb was. I mean, Davis Webb was just third string quarterback to me. I
think Davis Webb did what we all expected him to do. He didn't do anything that impressive. He was just efficient, and we know what he does in the film room. So he's going to pick apart a preseason defense with the quick reads and quick passes. So I don't think it's anything where we have a quarterback controversy. I didn't know that was a narrative that was going on, but
if that's a narrative, I'm going to push it. I like that narrative. Davis Webb pushing Josh Allen for the job. Again, talk about the Josh Allen contract being an albatross. I mean, that'd be something else. All right. So that, I think, wraps up this week's Cover One Roundup. Thank you, those who did stick through till the end. An hour and 3 minutes. That's a long show. So, again, thank you for sticking through and watching this entire thing. I think it was a pretty good show. Maybe our best yet. I don't know.
I think so. I agree.
Hey, we're growing every week. We're sticking to the fundamentals, and we're stacking days. That's what we're doing here.
Stacking good days.
All right. So again, thank you for watching. Make sure to bookmark cover1.net. We got some great stuff over there. Always cooking up some great stuff. Follow Cover One on Twitter. Follow all the Cover One people. Consider subscribing to Cover One Premium. You can join the Cover One Premium chat, Slack chat. Again, have access to some great content over there. And it's affordable. It's an affordable price for some great content. And then you get to talk to us in the Slack. And I will say there's a few people who are funny in the Slack. I won't say who's not funny. I'll keep the suspense up. You have to join to see who's funny and who's not. But Also, check out Underdog Fantasy. Again, use promo code Cover1. Thank you, Underdog, for sponsoring this show and Cover1. Did I hit all the tags, Rob?
You sure did.
All right, Rob, where can the people find you on the internet?
Follow me on Twitter at RobQuinn619.
You can follow me on Twitter at Kyle Silagyi, or you can find me out in the town this weekend celebrating my birthday, the big 3-5 this year, Rob.
Oh.
35 years old this year.
Oh, boy.
I know, I'm looking older. Not great. But thank you guys for watching, and we'll talk to you next week when we will review the Bills-Bears game. It's going to be electric. All right, so thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next week.